The envelope was cream-colored expensive stock with my father's law firm logo embossed in the corner. It sat on the counter of my cafe at 11 p.m., surrounded by the chaos of my closing routine. Dirty mugs in the sink, floor dusting every surface. The espresso machine still clicking as it cooled down. I'd found it wedged in my door when I went to lock up, no note, no explanation. Just my name typed on the front in that formal, impersonal font that meant business, not family. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single document, professionally formatted, every word chosen with surgical precision. Notice of lease termination and property claim. The building I'd spent 3 months transforming into Willow and Whisk, the space where I'd poured every penny of my savings and every ounce of my hope, apparently belonged to a holding company I'd never heard of. Monroe Capital Ventures, LLC. My landlord was being bought out. My lease, according to the letter, contained a clause allowing termination under new ownership. I had 30 days to vacate. At the bottom, in my father's handwriting, a note: "We need to talk about your options. Sunday dinner, 6 p.m. This doesn't have to end badly." I read it 3 times before my brain could process what I was seeing. My father owned the company buying my building. My father was evicting me from my own dream. 3 months of 14-hour days of proving to myself that I wasn't just the dreamer my family labeled me, of building something real and sustainable and mine. And he'd had the power to destroy it all along. He'd just been waiting. Waiting for me to invest everything. Waiting for me to be vulnerable. Waiting for the perfect moment to force my hand. This wasn't a supply chain issue I could solve. This wasn't a business challenge I could overcome with hard work. This was checkmate. Or at least that's what he thought. If you've ever felt like your own family was rooting for you to fail, hit that like button. And subscribe, because this story is about to get a whole lot more satisfying. Drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to choose between your dreams and your family's approval. Now let me take you back to where this all started. The story really begins not 6 months ago, but 27 years ago, in the kitchen of our family home in the West Hills. I was 3 years old, standing on a step stool next to my grandmother, my tiny hands covered in flour as she taught me to make her famous cinnamon rolls. That's my earliest memory. Not a birthday party or a family vacation, but the warm smell of yeast and sugar, my grandmother's patient hands guiding mine as we kneaded dough. She died when I was 7, but she left me something more valuable than an inheritance. She left me a passion. My family never understood it. To them, cooking was something you paid people to do. My father, Richard Monroe, built his wealth as a financial consultant to tech startups and real estate developers. He turned failing companies into profitable ventures, and he did it with ruthless efficiency. Success to him was quantifiable, measurable. It came with a $sign and preferably several zeros. My mother, Lillian, had been a promising architect before she married my father. She gave up her career to raise us and manage his social calendar, and I think some part of her resented it, even though she'd never admit it. She channeled that into us, her children, pushing us to achieve the success she'd abandoned. Elliot, my older brother by 4 years, was born to excel in their world. He was the kid who color-coded his homework in elementary school, who ran for student council and won, who got a full ride to Stanford and graduated summa cum laude before landing at a prestigious investment firm at 23. By the time I was a sophomore in college, still figuring out my major, Elliot was being profiled in Portland Business Journal as one of the city's rising financial stars. He wasn't just successful. He was the kind of successful that made our father's chest puff out at cocktail parties. Sierra, 2 years older than me, took a different path but ended up in the same place. She was beautiful, effortlessly so, with our mother's cheekbones and an instinct for social dynamics that made her perfect for marketing. She worked her way up at a major agency specializing in lifestyle brands, and by 28 she was directing campaigns for national clients. She had the Instagram following to match a carefully curated feed of her perfect life that made hundreds of thousands of people feel inadequate, including me if I'm being honest. And then there was me. Carly, the youngest, the dreamer, the one who changed majors 3 times before settling on culinary arts, much to my family's horror. I still remember the dinner when I told them. I'd been at Portland State for 2 years, bouncing between business administration, which bored me to tears, and art history, which my father called a hobby degree. I was miserable, spending my weekends working at a local bakery just to feel alive. That's where I realized what I wanted. Not to study food. To create it. To build something with my hands that made people happy. I'd been accepted to the Western Culinary Institute, a decision I'd made without consulting anyone. I was 20 years old, and I thought that meant I didn't need permission. I waited until everyone had finished dinner. My mother had made reservations at the Heathman, one of Portland's most expensive restaurants, to celebrate Sierra's promotion. The irony of telling them about culinary school at a fancy restaurant wasn't lost on me. I took a breath and just said it. I'm not going back to Portland State. I've been accepted to culinary school. I start in the fall. The silence was deafening. My father set down his wineglass with deliberate care. My mother's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Elliot looked uncomfortable. Sierra's eyes went wide, then narrowed into that calculating look she got when she was figuring out how to spin something. You're joking. My father's voice was flat. When I didn't respond, he continued. Carly, cooking is a hobby. A nice skill to have for dinner parties. It's not a career. It is for me. My voice was smaller than I wanted it to be. I've thought about this a lot. I'm good at it. I love it. And I want to build a career doing something I'm passionate about. Passion doesn't pay bills. My father leaned back, his fingers steepled in that way he did when he was about to lecture someone. Do you know what the median salary is for a chef? For a baker. You'll spend 10 years working brutal hours in hot kitchens for barely above minimum wage. Meanwhile, you could finish your business degree, go to graduate school, and be pulling 6 figures by the time you're 25. Not everyone measures success in dollars, Dad. The words came out more defiant than I'd intended. No, but landlords do. Grocery stores do. The real world does. He shook his head. I'm not paying $20,000 a year for you to learn to make cookies. My mother jumped in her tone, softer but somehow more cutting. Honey, your father and I just want you to be realistic. You're such a talented girl. You could do anything. Why limit yourself to something so domestic? So small. Small. That word hung in the air. My grandmother's kitchen, the place where I'd felt most myself, reduced to something small. Something less than. Elliot tried to be diplomatic. Maybe you could minor in hospitality management. At least that way you'd have business credentials too. Keep your options open. Only Sierra said nothing. She just watched me with those calculating eyes, and I could practically see her updating her mental hierarchy. Another rung above me on the ladder of family worth. I went to culinary school anyway. I paid for it myself with student loans and the inheritance my grandmother had left me, money my parents couldn't touch. They came to my graduation, but they arrived late and left early. My father spent the ceremony checking his phone. When I graduated top of my class, the only acknowledgement was my mother saying, well, at least you were dedicated. The next few years were exactly as hard as my father had predicted. I worked at upscale restaurants, artisan bakeries, even a brief stint at a catering company. The hours were brutal. The pay was insulting. I lived in a studio apartment in Southeast Portland that I could barely afford, worked doubles and triples, and spent every family gathering fielding questions about when I was going to get a real job. Elliot bought his first condo in the Pearl District. Sierra got engaged to a pediatric surgeon she'd met at a charity gala. And I burned my hands on sheet pans and tried to perfect my croissant recipe. But I was happy. Or I thought I was. Looking back, I think I was just too exhausted to question whether the scraps of satisfaction I was getting were enough. I was waiting, though, I didn't realize it, for my family to see me. To recognize that what I was doing mattered. That I mattered. That recognition never came. Instead, I got something worse. I got Sierra's wedding. Sierra's wedding was exactly what you'd expect. 200 guests at a vineyard in Willamette Valley. Designer dress. String quartet. A 7-course dinner that cost more than I made in 6 months. I was a bridesmaid, of course, stuffed into a lavender dress that Sierra had chosen because it looked amazing on everyone else and washed me out. During the reception, as I was standing at the edge of the dance floor watching my family celebrate Sierra's perfect life, my mother found me. You look lovely, sweetheart. She was lying. We both knew it. This must be so hard for you, seeing your big sister settling down, starting her real life. She squeezed my arm in what might have been sympathy if it hadn't felt so much like pity. But don't worry. Your time will come. Maybe you'll meet someone at one of these events. A nice accountant or lawyer. Someone stable who can take care of you. I don't need taking care of Mom. I'm doing fine. Of course you are, honey. She smiled, that smile that made me feel like I was still 5 years old and had just insisted I could tie my own shoes. You're working very hard at your little baking job. We're all very proud of how dedicated you are. Little baking job. I was a pastry chef at one of Portland's most respected farm-to-table restaurants. I'd been featured in a local food magazine, but to my mother it was little. That night, I went home to my studio apartment still wearing that lavender dress, and I cried. Not sad tears, angry tears, frustrated tears. The kind of tears that come when you realize you've been running a race that you can never win because the finish line keeps moving. I'd spent years trying to prove to my family that my choices were valid, that my career mattered, that I was worth their respect. And I was never going to get it. Not as long as I was chasing their definition of success instead of my own. That's when the idea really took root. I'd been toying with it for months, scrolling through commercial real estate listings late at night, sketching floor plans on napkins during slow shifts, opening my own place. Not a restaurant. Something smaller, more personal. A coffee shop that served real food. Handmade pastries. A place where people felt welcome, not impressed. Where quality mattered more than Instagram aesthetics, though it wouldn't hurt to be Instagram worthy. Somewhere that felt like my grandmother's kitchen, warm and safe and full of possibility. I spent 6 months putting together a business plan. Real research, not the kind of dreamy fantasizing my family would assume I was doing. I studied demographic data, analyzed foot traffic patterns, researched suppliers, and calculated overhead costs down to the penny. I found a location, a former bookshop in a transitional neighborhood near the Pearl District. It wasn't trendy yet, but I could see the potential. Young families moving in. Artists priced out of more expensive areas. Small businesses starting to take root. The rent was just barely manageable. I had enough saved for the least basic equipment and maybe 2 months of operating expenses. It was terrifying. It wasn't enough. But it was what I had, and I'd learned long ago that waiting for security was just another way of never starting. I didn't tell my family until I'd signed the lease. I was 26 years old, sitting in my childhood bedroom at a mandatory Sunday dinner, surrounded by sketches of cafe layouts and recipe notebooks I'd kept since high school. My mother came upstairs to tell me dinner was ready and found me surrounded by my plans. "Honey, your father and I have been talking. This whole cafe thing, it's sweet, really. But you know what the statistics say. 80% of restaurants fail within the first 3 years." She stepped inside, sitting on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was little and had scraped my knee. But this felt different. This felt like she was trying to cushion a blow. "We just don't want to see you waste your savings on a hobby. You're still young enough to go back to school, get your MBA like Elliot. Now that's a secure future. This isn't a hobby, Mom. I've signed a lease. I'm doing this." Her face went through several emotions. Surprise. Concern. And then something that looked almost like fear, without discussing it with us. "Carly, this is a huge decision. Your father needs to see your business plan. Elliot should review your financial projections. We can't just let you throw away your future on a whim." "It's not a whim. I've been planning this for months. I have a solid business plan. I've done my research." She stood up, smoothing her skirt in that way she did when she was agitated but trying to hide it. "Well, you'll need to present it to your father. Tonight? Before you make any more rash decisions. I've already signed the lease, Mom. The decision is made." Dinner that night was excruciating. My father sat at the head of the table, my business plan in front of him, flipping through pages with increasingly deep frowns. Elliot sat to his right, already shaking his head. Sierra kept glancing at her phone occasionally, looking up to offer pitying glances. My mother picked at her food, not eating. This is extremely naive. My father finally spoke, his voice carrying that edge of disappointment I'd heard my whole life. "Your projected revenue is optimistic at best. Your expense calculations don't account for adequate contingency. Your marketing plan is essentially non-existent. And you're grossly underestimating the competition." Elliot leaned forward, putting on his concerned big brother face. "Carly, I get it. You want something of your own. That's admirable. But you're not thinking practically. What happens when you run out of money in month 3? Where's your backup plan?" He flipped to a page. "You've got your entire savings tied up in this. If it fails, you're bankrupt. You'd be starting over at 27 with nothing. 26. I'm 26. Exactly. Still young enough to recover from this mistake if you back out now." Sierra finally looked up from her phone. "From a marketing perspective, you're trying to enter an incredibly saturated market. There are already 3 established coffee shops within a half-mile of your location. What's your differentiation strategy? Your unique value proposition?" She said it like she was testing me, like she already knew I didn't have a good answer. But I did. Quality. Community. Authenticity. Things you can't quantify on a spreadsheet. Things that matter more than market saturation. My father cut me off before I could say any of that. Carly, I'm going to be direct with you because no one else will. This is going to fail. Not because you're not talented. You're a fine baker. But running a business requires skills you simply don't have. Financial management, personnel administration, marketing, strategic planning. These aren't things you pick up from a few YouTube videos. I've taken business courses. I've worked in restaurants for 5 years. I know how the industry works. Working in a restaurant is not the same as owning one. You've never had to make payroll. Manage inventory. Deal with permits and health inspections and insurance. You're setting yourself up for a very expensive, very public failure. The words hit like a slap. Public failure. That's what he was really worried about. Not my happiness or my financial stability. He was worried about what it would look like when I failed. How it would reflect on the Monroe family name. I appreciate your concern. I kept my voice level even though I wanted to scream. But I'm doing this. With or without your support. Then you're doing it without our money. My father closed the business plan and slid it back across the table. I won't enable this kind of recklessness. When you come to your senses, we can discuss getting you enrolled in a graduate program. Until then, you're on your own. I'd expected that. It still hurt. What I hadn't expected was the campaign that followed. Over the next few weeks, as I worked to transform the empty shell of a former bookshop into Willow and Whisk, my family launched a coordinated effort to change my mind. My mother called daily with articles about restaurant failures, always introduced with, "I'm just worried about you, honey." Elliot sent me job postings at financial firms, suggesting I could still get in on the ground floor somewhere. Sierra posted on Instagram about knowing when to cut your losses with hashtags about self-awareness and life pivots that felt distinctly aimed at me. But the worst was my father. He didn't call. He didn't send articles. He just waited. And every time I saw him at a family obligation, he'd ask the same question. "Changed your mind yet?" And when I said no, he'd nod like he was expecting it, like he was just waiting for the inevitable crash. I threw myself into the work. I painted walls. I refinished tables I'd bought at estate sales. I interviewed potential employees. I tested recipes until I had a menu I was proud of. And I ignored the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my father asking what I'd do when the money ran out. That's when I met Rachel. She responded to my Craigslist ad for a barista, and she showed up to the interview with purple streaks in her hair, a portfolio of latte art designs, and an enthusiasm that felt like oxygen after months of suffocating doubt. She was 22, fresh out of Portland State, with a degree in sociology and no idea what to do with it, except that she definitely didn't want an office job. We met in the cafe while it was still under construction. Paint cans everywhere. Sawdust coating everything. The espresso machine I'd bought used was sitting in the corner, still in pieces. Most people would have taken one look and run. Rachel walked in, looked around, and grinned. "This is going to be amazing. When do I start?" I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Don't you want to ask about pay? Hours? Benefits? Boss, I've worked at 3 different corporate coffee chains. Starbucks, Dutch Brothers, an indie place that got bought out and immediately went soulless. They all sucked for the same reason. No one cared. Not about the coffee, not about the customers, definitely not about the employees. You care. I can tell. So yeah, I want in. We can figure out the details." I hired her on the spot. She was my first employee, my first real ally, and the first person outside of my grandmother's memory who looked at my dream and saw potential instead of a punchline. The 6 weeks leading up to opening day were a blur of inspections and inventory deliveries and learning how to work the point-of-sale system I couldn't really afford. Rachel and I worked side by side, often late into the night, her playing indie music on her phone, while I perfected batch after batch of scones and croissants. She told me about her family, her Mexican mother and white father growing up between cultures and never quite fitting in either. She understood in a way my own family never had what it felt like to be dismissed. Opening day was set for a Friday in April. I'd done some basic marketing, posted on local Facebook groups, handed out flyers in the neighborhood. I'd made a beautiful sign hand-painted by a local artist I'd commissioned. Willow and Whisk. The name was intentional. The willow for resilience, for bending without breaking. The whisk for the work, the craft, the mixing of ingredients into something greater than their parts. The night before opening, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from my family. A good luck text. "We believe in you" note. Anything. Nothing came. Instead, I lay in bed in my studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, running through checklists in my mind, and trying not to think about what would happen if my father was right. I got to the cafe at 4 a.m. on opening day. I needed to start the first batch of pastries, get everything set up, make sure the space was perfect. The morning was cool and quiet, the streets empty except for a few joggers and the occasional car. I unlocked the door to Willow and Whisk turned on the lights and just stood there for a moment taking it in. The exposed brick walls I'd fought to preserve. The mismatched vintage chairs I'd collected over months. The menu board Rachel had lettered in her beautiful handwriting. The smell of fresh paint and wood polish and possibility. This was mine. Whatever happened next, I'd built this. Rachel arrived at 5:30, bringing coffee and travel mugs because our machine wasn't warm yet, and we worked in comfortable silence, falling into a rhythm that felt natural. By 6 a.m., the pastry case was full. The coffee was brewing. The lights were perfect. We were ready. That's when I made the mistake of checking my phone. The family group chat was exploding. But it wasn't about me. It was a photo of Elliot in a sharp suit holding a crystal award flanked by my beaming parents. The lighting was professional. The composition was perfect. My father's arm was around Elliot's shoulders, genuine pride on his face. My mother was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The caption written by my mother read, "So proud of our Elliot. Best young financial executive in Portland. 3 years running. The future is bright. The future is bright." Posted at 5:57 a.m. on my opening day. I felt something crack inside my chest. It wasn't new pain. It was old pain, compressed and concentrated, a lifetime of coming in third, suddenly crystallizing into this one moment. They knew it was my opening day. I'd reminded them 3 times. Sent calendar invites. My mother had said she wasn't sure they could make it because of Elliot's award ceremony, but I'd assumed the ceremony was in the evening. That maybe they'd stop by in the morning. That my opening day meant something. But here was the truth documented in pixels. Elliot's award ceremony was this morning. Early. And they'd chosen to be there instead of here. They'd made their choice and it wasn't me. It had never been me. Rachel found me in the back, sitting on a flour sack, crying silently while holding my phone. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just took the phone from my hands, set it aside, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Listen to me. Their loss. You hear me? Their fucking loss." She pulled back, holding my shoulders, her eyes intense. "Today isn't about them. It's about everyone who's going to walk through that door and taste your magic. It's about building something that matters. So you're going to wash your face, put on your apron, and show this city what Carly Monroe can do. Fuck the people who can't see it." I laughed through the tears. "You're very good at pep talks. I have older brothers too. I've had practice." The door chimes rang at 6:29, 1 minute before our official opening. Mrs. Albright from the flower shop next door, her arms full of congratulatory tulips. "Oh, honey, I know I'm early, but I couldn't wait. I've been watching you work so hard." She set the flowers on the counter and pulled me into a hug that smelled like roses and baby powder. "Your grandmother would be so proud." I cried again, but different tears this time. By 6:45, we had a line out the door. Construction workers in dusty jeans and work boots. Young parents pushing strollers. A group of nurses just off the night shift. College students with backpacks and laptops. Each person who walked in seemed genuinely excited to be there to try the new local spot to support a small business. They complimented the space. They raved about the pastries. They asked about the art on the walls, the vintage mugs, the origin of our coffee beans. By 8 a.m., my first batch of croissants was gone. By 9, I was pulling my 3rd round of chocolate chip cookies from the oven. By noon, Rachel and I were moving in synchronized chaos, barely keeping up with the rush. This wasn't just a successful opening day. This was validation. Proof. Evidence that my instincts had been right, that there was a hunger for exactly what I'd created. But I couldn't fully enjoy it. Because every time the door chimed, part of me hoped it would be my family. Every time I was disappointed. At 2 p.m. during a brief lull, I checked my phone. 17 messages in the family chat, all about Elliot's award. Photos of him giving his acceptance speech. Videos of the standing ovation. My father posting links to the Portland Business Journal article. Sierra sharing it to her Instagram story with the caption, "So proud of this guy." My mother sending prayer hands emojis and heart emojis and celebrating emojis. Not one message acknowledging my opening day. Not one. I typed out a message 3 different times and deleted it each time. Finally, I just sent a photo. The line of customers outside Willow and Whisk. The full pastry case. Rachel pulling a perfect shot of espresso with a huge grin. The caption was simple, day 1. We're open. 3 dots appeared immediately. Someone was typing. The dots disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Finally, a message from my mother. That's wonderful, dear. Congratulations. A single party popper emoji. Nothing from my father. Nothing from Elliot. Sierra sent a thumbs up. That was it. I put my phone away and didn't check it again for the rest of the day. That evening, after we'd closed and Rachel had gone home, I sat alone in the cafe doing the day's accounting. We'd exceeded my projections by 30%. I had enough to cover expenses for the month and start building a small cushion. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I felt hollow, because I'd realized something fundamental about myself that I didn't like. I'd opened Willow and Whisk for me, yes, but I'd also opened it for them. To prove something, to earn something I'd been chasing my whole life and never caught. Their pride, their respect, their attention. And I still didn't have it. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Wake up at 4 a.m. Start baking. Open at 6:30. Serve customers until 3. Prep for the next day. Close. Go home. Sleep. Repeat. The work was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. We were building a regular customer base. People who came every morning for their coffee and a cinnamon roll. The book club that met every Thursday afternoon taking over the big corner table. The freelance workers who treated Willow and Whisk like their personal office, buying enough coffee to justify the Wi-Fi password. We were succeeding. Not hugely, not explosively, but steadily. Sustainably. Exactly how I'd planned it. But my family couldn't just let it be. The interference started small. My mother dropping by unannounced during the morning, rush her eyes, taking in every detail with an expression I couldn't quite read. She'd run her finger along the edge of a table, examining it for dust. She'd comment on how tired I looked. She'd suggest hiring more help, expanding the menu, changing the layout. Each suggestion felt like criticism wrapped in concern. Elliot started sending me articles. Not about restaurant failures anymore, but about successful ones. Corporate coffee chains acquiring indie shops. The professionalization of the artisan food movement. Stories about small businesses that had scaled up, always with a note like, "Thought you might find this interesting." The subtext was clear: you're doing okay now, but you'll need our expertise to grow. Sierra was more direct. She showed up one Tuesday afternoon with her laptop and a portfolio. "I need to talk to you about your branding." She didn't ask if I had time. She just spread out materials on a table, pushing aside someone's coffee mug. "Your Instagram presence is basically non-existent. Your website is adequate, but not optimized. And your logo, while charming, isn't scalable. I can fix all of this. Consider it my gift." She smiled, but it was the smile of someone who'd already decided I needed fixing. "I don't want to scale. I want to build community. Community doesn't pay the bills, Carly. Trust me, I work in marketing. You need to think bigger." She opened a folder showing me mock-ups she'd already created. Sleeker logos. Professional photos. A whole rebranding that would transform Willow and Whisk into something unrecognizable. Something that looked like every other gentrified coffee shop in Portland. "I appreciate the thought, but I like what we've built. I'm not changing it." Her smile tightened. "You're being stubborn. This is why people with passion projects need professional guidance. You're too close to it to see clearly. Or maybe I see it more clearly than you do." She left the folder. "Just look it over. Think about it. When you're ready to be serious about growth, call me." She left and I threw the folder in the recycling without opening it. But the worst interference came from my father. He didn't visit. He didn't call. He just waited. And then, 6 weeks after opening, he made his move. Sunday dinners were a mandatory family tradition. Missing one required a documented emergency. I'd been avoiding them by claiming I needed to prep for the week, but my mother had insisted I couldn't miss Elliot's birthday dinner. So I showed up exhausted and wary to their Pearl District loft. The dinner was everything I expected. Expensive wine I couldn't afford. Catered food from a restaurant I'd worked at years ago. Conversation dominated by Elliot's recent successes. He'd just closed a major deal, something involving venture capital and tech startups that I only half understood. My father was practically glowing with pride. My mother kept toasting to his future. Sierra posted no fewer than 6 Instagram stories during dinner, each one celebrating Elliot with the kind of effusive praise she'd never directed at me. I sat quietly moving food around my plate, counting down the minutes until I could leave. Then after dessert, my father cleared his throat. That sound. The one that meant he was about to make an important announcement. Everyone fell silent. So Carly, let's talk about your little venture. He said it casually, like he was asking about a hobby I'd taken up. I understand you've been open for about 6 weeks now. How's that going? It's going well. Revenue is steady. We're building a loyal customer base. That's good. That's very good. He nodded like a teacher, encouraging a student who'd given a partially correct answer. And I assume you're keeping detailed financial records, tracking your expenses, managing your cash flow properly. Of course. He smiled. That's what I like to hear. Because your mother and I have been discussing your situation, and we think it's time to have a serious conversation about the future of your business. He pulled out a folder from the side table behind him. I'd prepared this information for you. Inside were spreadsheets, market analysis, competitive research, risk assessments. It was thorough, professional, and deeply condescending. Every page screamed the same message: you don't know what you're doing. Dad, I don't need. Just hear me out. He held up a hand. You've proven you can get a business off the ground. That's admirable. It really is. But the next phase is going to require expertise you simply don't have. Financial planning, strategic growth, risk management. These are complex disciplines that take years to master. He paused for effect. That's why I'm proposing that Elliot join your operation as a financial consultant. No cost to you. Just family helping family. Elliot jumped in right on cue. I've been looking at some preliminary numbers and I think there's real potential here. But you're leaving money on the table with your current pricing structure. Your cost management could be optimized. And your growth strategy needs serious revision. He pulled out his own folder. I've put together a preliminary business plan for the next 3 years. Expansion timeline, staffing projections, marketing budget. With my guidance, we could turn Willow and Whisk into a real business. It is a real business. You know what I mean. A professional operation. Something sustainable long-term. Right now, you're barely breaking even. With proper management, you could be profitable within 6 months. Sierra added her piece. And I'm happy to handle your social media and branding pro bono, of course. We need to get you on TikTok, Instagram Reels, partner with influencers, build a real online presence. She looked at me with something that might have been pity. You're doing your best, but you're out of your depth. Let us help you before you make costly mistakes. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand. Honey, this is what family does. We support each other. You've worked so hard. You deserve to succeed. And with everyone's help, you will. She smiled warmly, genuinely, believing she was being supportive. Think of it like a family project. All of us working together. I looked around the table at their expectant faces. My father certain he'd made an offer I couldn't refuse. Elliot already mentally reorganizing my business. Sierra probably designing new logos in her head. My mother who genuinely thought this was love. And I felt it rising up in me. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Clearer. A kind of icy certainty. No. The word hung in the air. I'm sorry. My father's eyebrows rose. I said no. This is my business. I built it with my money, my vision, and my work. I don't need Elliot to manage my finances. I don't need Sierra to fix my branding. And I don't need a family intervention disguised as support. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the polished concrete floor. Thank you for dinner. I'll see myself out. I left before anyone could respond. Before I could second-guess myself. Before the weight of their disappointment could press me back into my chair. I sat in my car outside their building for 20 minutes, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages flooding in. I turned it off without looking and drove home. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over. Part of me felt triumphant. I'd stood up to them, set a boundary. But another part, the part that had spent 27 years seeking their approval, felt terrified. What if I just made a huge mistake? What if I really did need their help? What if this was pride going before a fall? By morning, I'd made a decision. I was going to succeed on my own terms or fail on them. No middle ground. No compromise. Willow and Whisk was mine, and it was going to stay that way. The next few weeks were tense. My mother called daily, her messages oscillating between hurt and concern. Your father is very upset. Elliot's just trying to help. Why are you being so stubborn? Sierra sent me a long text about how I was letting my ego damage potential opportunities. Elliot's messages were colder. When you're ready to be professional, let me know. I blocked them all, but I couldn't block the family group chat where life continued without me. Photos of dinners I wasn't invited to. Celebrations I wasn't part of. The message was clear: fall in line or be left out. I chose left out. Meanwhile, Willow and Whisk was thriving in quiet ways. Not explosive growth, but steady. Our morning regulars became friends. We learned their orders, their names, their stories. Mrs. Albright brought us flowers every week. The bookstore that opened next door sent customers our way. We were becoming woven into the fabric of the neighborhood exactly as I'd hoped. Then Vanessa Walker walked in. It was a Tuesday morning mid-rush, and I almost didn't notice her. She was in her mid-30s, sharp blazer over jeans, carrying a worn leather messenger bag and a notebook that had seen better days. She ordered a cappuccino and a lemon lavender scone, found a seat by the window, and proceeded to spend the next hour just watching. Not working on a laptop, not scrolling on her phone, just watching how we operated, how we interacted with customers, how the space functioned. When the rush died down, she approached the counter. Carly Monroe. That's me. I was wiping down the espresso machine flour, still dusting my apron. Vanessa Walker, Portland Chronicle. She handed me a business card. I'd like to talk to you about Willow and Whisk. I've been following your progress, and I think there's a story here. My heart jumped. The Portland Chronicle was the city's largest independent newspaper, known for actual journalism in an age of clickbait. Being featured there would be huge. What kind of story? The kind about small businesses doing it right. Local ownership. Community engagement. Sustainable growth. She smiled. The kind of story Portland loves. Plus, I've been tracking your sales numbers through some public permits, and you're outperforming the corporate chains in your area. That's newsworthy. We sat down and she asked me everything. How I'd started. Why I'd started. My background, my vision, my challenges. I found myself telling her the truth. About culinary school and my family's disapproval. About opening with my savings and no backup plan. About building something I believed in even when no one else did. I didn't mention my family by name, but she read between the lines. So you did this alone. No investors. No partners. Just you and your vision. Me and my vision and my incredibly talented barista. I gestured to Rachel, who was pulling shots with practiced precision. I couldn't have done it without her. Vanessa took notes, asked for permission to take photos, and spent another hour documenting Willow and Whisk. The exposed brick. The vintage furniture. The chalkboard menu. The customers who were comfortable enough to be themselves here. Before she left, she turned to me with a serious expression. I'm going to be honest with you. This is exactly the kind of story that makes powerful people uncomfortable. Small businesses that succeed without traditional backing. Especially women who don't ask permission. You might get some pushback. From who? She shrugged. People who think they know better. People who told you it wouldn't work. Just be prepared. The article ran 2 weeks later on a Sunday morning. I didn't know it was coming. I woke up to 47 notifications on my phone, which I'd finally unblocked. Text messages. Emails. Instagram DMs. All sharing the same link. Portland Chronicle. Front page of the business section. The headline read, Willow and Whisk: How One Woman's Dream Became Portland's Favorite Coffee Rebellion. I sat in bed still in my pajamas and read it 3 times. Vanessa had captured everything. Not just the facts, but the feeling. She'd included testimonials from regular customers. Quotes from Mrs. Albright about how I'd revitalized the block. She'd compared my sales figures to the Starbucks 2 blocks away and shown with actual data that I was winning. The article ended with a quote from me that I barely remembered, giving I didn't open Willow and Whisk to compete with anyone. I opened it to create something that couldn't be replicated by a corporation. Community can't be franchised. Rachel called me before I'd finished reading. Boss, have you seen it? We're on the front page. She was screaming with excitement. My mom already called. She showed it to everyone at her church. You're famous. I'm not famous. I'm just in the newspaper. Same thing. Get down here. We're already getting calls. People want to order catering. Some tech company wants to do a partnership. This is huge. I got dressed in a daze and headed to the cafe. As I walked the 3 blocks from my apartment, I passed people reading the physical newspaper, the Portland Chronicle, spread open to the business section. A couple saw me and literally pointed. "Are you the Willow and Whisk woman? We're coming by today." The cafe was packed. Not just our regulars, but new faces. People who'd read the article and wanted to see what the fuss was about. Rachel was handling the rush with a grin that looked like it might split her face. We worked in synchronized chaos for hours, pulling shots and warming pastries and welcoming what felt like half of Portland through our door. During a brief lull, I checked my phone. The family group chat was eerily silent. No comments on the article. No congratulations. Just silence. Then, finally, a message from my mother. "Very nice article, honey. We're all very proud." That was it. No emoji. No elaboration. Just that one sentence that felt obligatory and empty. Sierra sent a separate message, "Impressive press. Let's talk about leveraging this momentum. I have some ideas." "Elliot, good for you. When you're ready to discuss serious growth strategies, I'm here." My father sent nothing. I stared at my phone, feeling a complicated mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. I'd wanted their validation for so long. And now that I had undeniable public proof of my success, their response was tepid at best. It should have hurt more than it did. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired of wanting something they were incapable of giving. That afternoon, as we were finally catching our breath, a woman in an expensive suit walked in. She was in her 50s, impeccable posture, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my rent. She ordered nothing, just approached the counter and asked if I was the owner. "I am. Can I help you?" She handed me a business card. "Ellen Reeves, Henderson Hospitality Group. We own a chain of boutique hotels throughout the Pacific Northwest. I read the article about Willow and Whisk this morning, and I'd like to discuss a potential partnership." My heart skipped. Henderson Hospitality was huge. Their hotels were fixtures in Portland, Seattle, Victoria. Having them as a client would be transformative. What kind of partnership? "We're looking to elevate our in-house breakfast offerings. Currently, we outsource to a commercial bakery, and honestly, the quality isn't what we want. Your pastries, your ethos of quality and community that aligns with our brand values. I'd like to propose a contract. You'd supply pastries and baked goods to 3 of our Portland locations. We'd start with a 3-month trial with the potential to expand to our entire Northwest region if it works out." She named a number. A weekly order that was more than I currently made in a month. My hands started to shake. That's a very generous offer. I need to think about capacity logistics, whether I can scale production without compromising quality. "Of course. Take some time. But not too much." She smiled. "You're going to get a lot of attention from this article. I'd like to be first in line." She left another card and her direct number. "Call me this week." After she left, Rachel grabbed my arms. "Did that just happen? Did we just get offered a contract with Henderson Hotels?" "I think so." I felt dizzy. This is too much. This is happening too fast. "Boss, this is amazing. This is everything you wanted. But was it?" I'd wanted to prove I could succeed. I'd wanted respect. But I'd also wanted to build something small and personal and mine. A corporate contract meant scaling up. It meant production schedules and delivery logistics, and potentially sacrificing the handmade quality that made Willow and Whisk special. It meant growing faster than I'd planned in ways I hadn't anticipated. It also meant I could finally, definitively prove to my family that I'd been right all along. I thought about it for 3 days. I ran the numbers. I mapped out what it would mean logistically. I talked to Rachel about whether she was ready to handle more responsibility, because I'd need to hire more staff and spend more time on production. I lost sleep. I made lists of pros and cons. And finally, I called Ellen Reeves and said yes. The next month was a blur of controlled chaos. I hired 2 more bakers and another barista. I reorganized the kitchen to accommodate larger production runs. I set up delivery schedules. I barely slept, but we made it work. The Henderson contract started, and suddenly Willow and Whisk wasn't just a neighborhood cafe. We were a regional supplier. Our pastries were being served in hotels alongside 5-star dinners. Food bloggers were writing about us. The health department inspector who'd been skeptical on her first visit came back and complimented our systems. Success felt strange. Good but strange. like I'd been climbing a mountain and suddenly found myself at a vista I hadn't expected to reach so soon. And my family noticed. They couldn't help but notice. Elliot's boss apparently stayed at a Henderson hotel and mentioned the excellent croissants from Willow and Whisk. Sierra saw us trending on Portland Food Instagram. My mother's friends were talking about the article at their book club. The Sunday dinner invitation came from my father personally. Not through my mother, not through the group chat. A call, his voice neutral and businesslike. "Carly, I think it's time we talked. Your mother is insisting on a family dinner, and I agree it's overdue. Sunday at 6. Please don't make this difficult." I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to watch them recalibrate now that I'd proven them spectacularly wrong. I showed up 5 minutes late, a small rebellion, still wearing my work clothes because I'd come straight from the cafe. My mother opened the door and her hug was tight, almost desperate. "Oh, honey, we've missed you." She pulled back, examining my face. "You look thin. Are you eating enough? You're working too hard." "I'm fine, Mom." The apartment felt the same but different. Or maybe I was different. I walked into that space where I'd felt small my entire life, and I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like a visitor. Dinner was awkward. Everyone trying too hard. My mother asking overly cheerful questions about the cafe. Sierra complimenting my recent Instagram posts in a way that felt pointed, like she was claiming credit for giving me advice I hadn't taken. Elliot being carefully neutral, like he was in a business meeting. My father mostly quiet, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Then after the main course, he started. "Carly, I want to say that your mother and I are pleased with how your business is progressing." Pleased. Not proud. Pleased. Like I'd gotten a B on a report card. The Portland Chronicle article was well-deserved recognition. And the Henderson contract is an impressive achievement. Thank you. I kept my voice neutral. Which is why we'd like to revisit our previous conversation. Now that you've proven the concept, now that you've demonstrated profitability and growth potential, I think it's time to formalize the structure of your business. He pulled out yet another folder. I've had our legal team draw up partnership papers. The Monroe Family Business Initiative. We'd restructure Willow and Whisk as an LLC with proper governance and profit sharing. Elliot jumped in. "I've put together a comprehensive 3-year plan. We'd open 2 more locations within the first year. Get you into grocery stores. Potentially develop a line of packaged goods. With my financial management and Sierra's marketing expertise, we could turn this into a 8-figure business within 5 years." Sierra nodded enthusiastically. "I've already drafted a social media campaign for the expansion. We'd position you as the face of the brand, very relatable founder story, and leverage that for partnerships and sponsorships. I've been in talks with some influencers who are perfect for our demographic." My mother reached over and squeezed my hand. "Don't you see, honey? This is wonderful. We'd all be working together. A real family business. You'd keep creative control, of course." She said it like it was a generous concession. "But you'd have the support and expertise you need to really succeed." I looked down at the folder my father had slid across the table. Partnership agreement. Profit sharing structure. Operational guidelines. I didn't need to read it to know what it meant. They wanted in. Now that I'd done the risky part, the hard part, the part where failure was a real possibility, they wanted to restructure everything under their control. I'd become an employee of my own dream. A creative director with a title but no power. And the brilliant, terrible thing was they genuinely believed they were being supportive. They'd rewritten the narrative in their heads. Now that I'd succeeded, they could pretend they'd always believed in me. They could insert themselves into my success story and claim they'd helped all along. In 5 years, they'd be telling people at cocktail parties about the family business they'd built together, conveniently forgetting they'd predicted its failure. I closed the folder without reading it, pushed it back across the table. "Thank you for the offer. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm going to have to decline." My father's expression hardened. "Carly, don't be foolish. This is a generous offer. We're giving you the opportunity to build something significant. Something lasting. I've already built something significant and lasting. And I did it without you. You did it with luck." Elliot's voice was sharp, his professional mask slipping. "You happened to get a good article. You happened to connect with the right client. But luck runs out. You need structure. You need professional management. You're 1 bad quarter away from collapse. Or maybe I'm exactly where I plan to be." Maybe I did my research and built something sustainable, and you can't accept that I didn't need your help to do it. Sierra shook her head. You're being emotional. This is why entrepreneurs need objective advisors. You're too attached to see clearly. No, I see very clearly. I see that you predicted I'd fail. You offered no support. You actively tried to discourage me. And now that I've succeeded, you want to take credit and control. You want to turn my success into our success. But this is my success. I earned it. And I'm not giving it away. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Honey, that's not fair. We're your family. We love you. We just want to help. You want to help now. Where were you on my opening day? I looked at each of them. Where were you when I was working 16-hour days and terrified I'd made the biggest mistake of my life? Where were you when I needed someone to believe in me? I pointed to the folder. This isn't help. This is a hostile takeover. And I'm saying no. My father stood up, his face red. You're making a mistake. A serious mistake. When this all falls apart, don't come crying to us for help. I won't. I stood to, grabbing my jacket. Thank you for dinner. I'll see myself out. This time when I left, I felt lighter. Because I'd realized something fundamental. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, trying to make them see me as worthy of respect. But they'd never seen me clearly. They'd seen a projection, a role I was supposed to play in their family narrative. The youngest daughter. The creative one. The dreamer who needed guidance and correction. And no amount of success would change that, because the problem wasn't my achievements. It was their perception. I couldn't change their perception, but I could change how much I let it matter. The next few weeks were silent from my family. No calls, no texts, not even in the group chat. It should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt peaceful. I focused on work, on building systems that could support growth without sacrificing quality, on training my new staff, on developing relationships with other local businesses, on being present for the community we'd built. Then my phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Miss Monroe, this is Dr. Patricia Chen from Providence Portland Medical Center. I'm calling about your father, Richard Monroe. He's been admitted with chest pain. He's stable now, but your mother asked me to contact you. My heart stopped. Is he okay? He's stable. We're running tests. But your mother would like you to come to the hospital if possible. I'll be right there. I drove to the hospital in a blur, my mind racing. I was angry at my father. I'd walked away from the family, but he was still my father. The thought of losing him before we'd resolved anything felt unbearable. I found my mother in the cardiac unit waiting room. She looked small and scared in a way I'd never seen her. Sierra was there, her Instagram perfect makeup smudged with tears. Elliot was pacing on his phone with insurance companies or lawyers or whoever people like Elliot called in a crisis. Mom. I sat next to her, taking her hand. She collapsed into me, sobbing. I was so scared. He was just sitting at his desk working, and then he said his chest hurt, and I called 911, and I thought, it's okay. He's okay. They're taking care of him. We sat there for hours. Elliot brought coffee. Sierra called relatives. My mother held my hand and didn't let go. And slowly we fell into old patterns. Family in crisis. We knew how to do this, how to circle the wagons and function as a unit when the threat was external. The doctor came out around 2 a.m. Mild heart attack. Not severe, but a warning sign. We're keeping him for observation. He needs to make some serious lifestyle changes. Stress management, diet, exercise. But with proper care, he should be fine. Can we see him? My mother's voice was small. One at a time. He needs rest. My mother went first. Then Elliot. Then Sierra. I was last. When I walked into the hospital room, my father looked old in a way I'd never noticed before. Without his suit and his authority, he was just a man in his early 60s, scared and tired and mortal. Carly. His voice was hoarse. You came. Of course I came. You're my dad. He looked away at the monitors beeping steadily beside him. I've been thinking. About what you said. About the business. He paused, swallowing hard. I was wrong. Not about the statistics or the risk. Those are still real. But I was wrong about you. I didn't think you could do it. Not because of who you are, but because I couldn't imagine anyone doing it. I've spent my whole career helping businesses that were already failing. I forgot what it looks like when someone builds something right from the start. Dad? No, let me finish. This might be the medication talking, but I need to say it. He finally looked at me. I'm proud of you. Not pleased. Not impressed. Proud. You did something I could never do. You risked everything on a belief, and you were right. That takes courage I don't have. I felt tears burning my eyes. Thank you. That means a lot. I don't expect you to forgive me for not believing in you, for not being there when you needed me. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what you've built, and it's remarkable. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said I don't need your investment, but I'd like your support. The real kind. The kind where you believe in me even when it's hard. I'd like that too. He smiled weakly. Though I reserve the right to worry. You're still my daughter. I can live with that. When I left the hospital at dawn, the sun was just coming up over Portland. The city looked new somehow. Or maybe I was seeing it differently. I drove to Willow and Whisk, let myself in, and started the morning prep. Rachel arrived at 6, took one look at me, and immediately made coffee. You look like hell. What happened? My dad had a heart attack. He's okay, but I shrugged. It's been a night. Family shit is the hardest shit. She handed me a mug. You okay? I think so. Maybe? I don't know. I looked around the cafe at everything we'd built. He said he was proud of me. Rachel grinned. Took him long enough. Yeah, but you didn't need him to say it. You already knew. I did. I do. But it was still good to hear. The next few months were different. My father recovered, started walking every morning, cut back his hours at work. My mother started coming to the cafe regularly, not to critique, but to sit with a book and a latte. She joined one of our regular book clubs, became friends with Mrs. Albright. Elliot stopped sending me business articles and started just asking how I was. He came in for coffee sometimes, and we'd talk about things that had nothing to do with work. Sierra featured Willow and Whisk on her Instagram, but this time with genuine enthusiasm instead of condescension. She brought her marketing clients to our space for meetings, giving us business and credibility. They didn't suddenly become perfect. My father still occasionally offered unsolicited advice about financial management. My mother still worried too much about me working too hard. Elliot and Sierra still operated with a level of confidence that bordered on arrogance. But they were trying. And I was letting them try, which was its own kind of progress. 3 months after my father's heart attack, after he'd been cleared by his doctors and was back to work part-time, my phone buzzed with an event invitation. Monroe family dinner. But this time it was for Monday night. At Willow and Whisk. My father had called ahead to reserve the back room. They all showed up at 7 dressed casually, and for once no one was checking their phones or talking about work. We ate pastries I'd baked and drank coffee Rachel had perfectly crafted. We talked about my mother's book club and Elliot's new hobby of woodworking and Sierra's upcoming vacation. We talked about my plans to hire a general manager so I could focus more on recipe development and less on daily operations. And at one point I looked around the table at my family and my space and I realized something. I'd spent so long wanting them to see me that I'd made my worth dependent on their vision. But I'd built something they couldn't ignore, and in doing so I'd learned to see myself clearly. I knew my value now. I knew what I was capable of. And that knowledge wasn't dependent on their approval, even if their approval was finally tentatively being offered. After dinner, my father pulled me aside. There's something I want to show you. He pulled out his phone, opening an email. It's from Davis Partnership. They're one of the firms I consult for. They're opening a new startup incubator focused on women-owned businesses. They asked if I knew anyone who might be willing to speak to their first cohort, to share their story about building something from scratch. I told them about you. They'd like you to keynote their launch event. Dad, I didn't know what to say. That's incredible. You've earned it. He looked uncomfortable, like genuine emotion was a language he was still learning to speak. I've been telling a lot of people about your business lately. About what you've accomplished. I hope that's okay. It's more than okay. Good. He cleared his throat. Because I'm proud of you. I know I've said it before, but I want to keep saying it until you believe that I mean it. I'm starting to. That night after my family had left and I'd closed up the cafe, I sat in the window seat looking out at the street. A year ago, I'd been terrified pouring my savings into an idea everyone said would fail. I'd been desperate for validation, willing to accept even scraps of approval from people who couldn't see my worth. I'd measured my success by their standards, running a race I could never win. But I'd built something anyway, not because they believed in me, but because I believed in the work, in the craft, in the community. And in doing so, I'd learned the most important lesson of all: you have to be your own biggest believer first. Everyone else can catch up later. Or they can't. Either way, you keep building. Now, 6 months later, things had continued to evolve in ways I couldn't have predicted. My father's heart attack had been a wake-up call for everyone, not just him. The Monday family dinners at Willow and Whisk had become a tradition. My mother had started taking baking classes, not from me, but from a program at the community college. She'd made her first successful croissant and cried actual tears of joy. Elliot had launched his own consulting firm and asked me to speak on a panel about entrepreneurship at his first networking event. Sierra was building her own agency instead of working for someone else, and she'd started asking me advice about the emotional challenges of running your own business. They were trying. We were all trying. And while our relationships weren't perfect, they were real now, built on respect instead of obligation, on boundaries instead of guilt. Willow and Whisk had grown too. We'd opened a second location near the art museum, the space I'd scouted months ago. I'd promoted Rachel to operations director and given her equity in the business. I'd hired a general manager for each location, which meant I could actually sleep sometimes. Our catering business was thriving. The Henderson Hotel's contract had expanded to their Seattle and Victoria properties. We were in talks with New Seasons Market about supplying their bakery sections. And I'd been approached by a local publisher about writing a cookbook. But more than the business metrics, I was proud of what we'd built culturally. Both locations felt like community hubs, places where people could be themselves, where the barista knew your order and your name and asked about your day, where local artists exhibited their work, where book clubs and knitting circles and writers' groups gathered. We'd created what I'd hoped to create, spaces that nourished more than just bodies. The keynote speech at the Women's Business Incubator had led to other speaking opportunities. I'd been invited to share my story at Portland State's entrepreneurship program, at a Women in Business conference, at a Culinary Institute graduation. Each time I told the truth, about the fear and the doubt and the family who didn't believe in me, about the decision to do it anyway, about learning to validate myself instead of seeking validation from others. After each speech, young women would approach me. They'd tell me their own stories of dreams, dismissed talents, underestimated ambitions labeled as unrealistic. They'd ask how I found the courage to keep going. And I'd tell them what I'd learned: courage isn't the absence of fear or doubt. It's doing the thing anyway. It's believing in yourself when no one else does. It's building something because you love it, not to prove something. One evening, I was at the original Willow and Whisk location working on recipes for the cookbook. The cafe was closed, empty except for me. I was testing a new variation on my grandmother's cinnamon rolls, trying to capture that exact flavor memory from childhood. The recipe was written on a stained index card in her handwriting, one of the few things I had left from her. As I kneaded the dough, my phone buzzed. The family group chat, which I'd unmuted months ago. A photo from my father. He was at a business conference in Seattle, standing in a Henderson hotel holding one of Willow and Whisk's signature chocolate croissants. The caption read, "Stopped at the Henderson, Seattle. Proud to say that's my daughter's croissant in their breakfast spread. Best pastry I've had in years." Below it, messages flooded in. My mother's heart emojis, genuine this time. "Elliot, that's my sister. Sierra, those croissants are literally everywhere now. It's amazing." I stared at the photo for a long moment. My father, the man who'd told me I was wasting my life on a hobby, was bragging about my success to strangers. The man who'd predicted public failure was publicly celebrating my achievements. A year ago, this would have meant everything to me. It would have felt like the validation I'd been chasing my entire life. Now it felt nice. Sweet even. But not necessary. Because I'd already validated myself. I'd already proven what I needed to prove, and I'd proven it to the only person whose opinion truly mattered: me. I went back to kneading dough, the rhythm, meditative and familiar. The smell of yeast and cinnamon filled the kitchen, exactly like my grandmother's kitchen all those years ago. I thought about that little girl on a step stool, learning to create something with her hands. Learning that love could be expressed in butter and flour and patience. That little girl had grown up to build something remarkable. Not despite her family, not because of them, but independent of them. She'd built it for herself. For the joy of the work. For the community it served. for the simple satisfaction of creating something good in the world. My phone buzzed again. Rachel, boss, just got a call. Someone wants to talk about franchising opportunities. Big money. Do you want the details? I looked around my cafe. The exposed brick I'd fought to preserve. The vintage chairs I'd collected one by one. The chalkboard menu in Rachel's handwriting. The photos of our regular customers that covered one wall. The community we'd built that couldn't be replicated by a franchise model. I typed back, no thanks. We're good as we are. I thought about everything that had happened. The rejection and the persistence. The doubt and the determination. The failure that everyone predicted and the success I'd built anyway. And I realized that the story wasn't about proving my family wrong. It never had been. It was about proving myself right. Success isn't proving other people wrong. It's proving yourself right. It's knowing your worth even when others can't see it. It's building something because it matters to you, not because it earns approval. It's the difference between external validation and internal certainty. I'd spent so many years chasing the first, not realizing I needed the second. In my business journal on a page I looked at every morning, I'd written something new. Build something because you love it, not to prove something. Don't wait for permission from people who'll never give it. Trust yourself even when everyone else thinks you're crazy. Especially then. Set boundaries early and hold them hard. Your dream doesn't need to make sense to anyone but you. And maybe most importantly, the people who are supposed to support you might not. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you have to be your own biggest believer first. Everyone else can catch up later. I looked at those words every single day. They'd become my operating principles, not just for business, but for life. And they worked. Not because they made everything easy, but because they made everything clear. Have you ever had to choose between your dreams and keeping the peace with people you love? Have you ever succeeded at something people told you was impossible? Drop a comment and share your story. If this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when everyone expects you to fold. Sometimes the best revenge is living well, but the best success is living authentically. What would you do if your family tried to take over your dream after predicting it would fail? Let me know in the comments below.